Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Collective Clicks podcast. This is your host, Brandon Bateman. And today I'm going to be joined by Garrett Cragen, who is our lead of paid media here at Bateman Collective, one of the best PPC masters that I know. We're going to talk all about keywords and negative keywords, which is just the first part of 8 parts of what is important to have a successful PPC campaign. We'll talk about all the details, the things that you don't normally hear about, and some of the biggest mistakes that we see investors making that if they were to fix, they would get better results with PPC. How are you doing today, Garrett?
Doing good. How are you?
Hey, doing excellent. Thank you. I know we just had a plan for some banter, but we're completely awkward as people. And I think that made this impossible.
Yes, we suck at being people.
Yeah, that's right. So we're good digital marketing robots. And I guess we'll just jump right into that stuff
That's
today.
right.
Sorry for everybody listening. We don't have anything fun to say. The topic for today, this is like the beginning of a series. And what we're going to go over today is basically the 8 things that are essential to have a successful PPC campaign, or the flip side of that is the 8 things that we see a lot of investors doing wrong when it comes to their PPC. So it's pretty in-depth. This is definitely one for you nerdy investors out there that want to get a little bit deeper into the weeds of PPC. We're going to talk about some technical terms and all of that kind of stuff. But if you're familiar with the platform, you'll find this pretty interesting. It's also, like I said, at 8 things. So we're just going to start with numbers 1 and 2 today. And those are basically, number 1 is like the keywords and negative keywords. And number 2 is the ads. So just to kick it off, a little bit of context for everybody. We do a lot of audits. It happens all the time. An investor comes to us and basically says, I don't know what's going wrong with this. I'm managing my own PPC. I'm working with an agency, whatever the case is, and it's just not working the way I want it to. And they ask us to take a look. So we look in the account, we see what's going on. Why are they not getting results? And pretty common there is this interaction between negative keywords and keywords. You have any specific thoughts on that, of common mistakes that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that in the space, there's a tendency to put too much focus on the sexy parts of PPC, like, oh, there's dynamic localization or different ad types. But really at the core of PPC, we are bidding on search terms and having good keywords and having good search terms. If that's in place, the odds are good that you're going to get good results. But if that's not there, everything else is going to underperform. It's very important that your keywords are targeting the right intent and you aren't bidding on searches that are out of market or not as high quality.
Yeah, you basically just said what I've said in so many audits recently, but with different words, which is something along the lines of, I'd love to talk about all the problems that you have here. You're not even eligible for most problems that you could have because you don't even have the right search terms, which is step 1. And people think they'll fix that and their campaigns will be great. That's like how you get from an F to a C.
Yeah, that's just bare minimum.
Yes.
Good searches is necessary. The rest of it is just not going to fix that. Like having a bad foundation, usually.
I think the root of that for a lot of companies is in the difference between keywords and search terms. A lot of people don't really understand that. Could you explain that?
Yep. So the search term is what's actually being searched, the target by the customer. That's them searching, how can I sell my house fast for cash? That's the search term. A keyword is what we tell Google is the rough intent that we want to target. So we can target a keyword and have the search term not match it. But
Most of the time it doesn't.
yeah, most of the time we're targeting a kind of search and Google does its own thing to match it as best as it can. And that's where going into those search terms is to see what you're actually paying for is important, because you can have good keywords and not have good search terms still. And that's where we could get stuck, is when we aren't being diligent in keeping those search terms pruned and cleaned up.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it could be helpful to put an example of things. Really common. You have a keyword, we buy houses, but then your search term is buy houses. So you're telling Google, I want we buy houses, and you're seeing I'm getting clicks and leads from we buy houses, everything's good. If you look at what did someone actually type into Google where your ad showed up, they might have searched buy houses. And to Google, you take the word we out. What difference is it? Google doesn't understand because they don't understand the niche. Anybody listening knows buy houses is buyer traffic. We buy houses is seller traffic. They're really different by nature. I also think a lot of people don't realize like how many search terms there are. It's insane. I did an analysis at one point. It's been a minute since this, so I'd be really curious to do the same analysis again. At the point that I did it across our clients, we found that over 80% of the leads that they got were from search terms that only had 1 click in the entire history of their account. So you think that it's going to be like, I have these like 5 things I'm going really heavy on, and that's where I'm going to get all my leads. But there's like thousands and thousands, and most of the lead come from long tail search terms, which is basically what it's called. And not that many come from those things that are searching over and over again. It's interesting.
Yeah, I saw a stat that there are 1,000 brand new search terms on Google every single day. So like what was searched historically isn't going to be static. They're always changing, they're always evolving. And so it's important to update your keywords based on what's happening now and what's working well now, because they're always changing and those search terms are going to be different every single day. And if those aren't being pruned, you're wasting a lot of budget.
Yeah, the stat that I saw is that about 15% of Google searches each day are completely unique and they've never been seen before in the history of Google. It rounds out to about 500 million searches every single day.
That's a better stat than what mine was. That's good.
I wonder if what you were
Keep me
looking at was like
honest.
a specific
Like
account or
niche
something,
yeah,
or a
something.
specific niche,
Yeah.
because like 500 million and 1,000 are like really different numbers. But
Roughly.
yeah, but it's insane. And I think this is like marketing stereotype 101, right? Like marketers like to put people in boxes. They like to say, my customer, I saw this funny post on LinkedIn where someone's just like making marketing predictions for 2023. And it was like super sarcastic. They said new CEOs in boardrooms are going to come up with customer avatars that are oddly specific in 2023, and it's not going to actually yield any benefit, because we do that all the time. We expect people to fit in these boxes that this is who my customer is, but people are so unique and so different, and the way they search for things is different all the time. One thing interesting to think about is how many keywords do you really need? Because I've talked to a lot of investors that think the name of the game is almost like guessing what all these search terms are going to be and making a keyword for each one of them. And they think, oh, I'm working with this professional PPC company. The difference that they have is they probably just have tens of thousands of keywords and they know everything that people search and all that stuff. What would you say about that?
I don't think it's as much about there's an ideal count of keywords in an account to maximize it. It's going to be based on volume. It's going to be based on intent and by budget, because if you can have 1,000 keywords in your account, but if your budget is $1,000 a month, probably not going to show up for most of those. And you're not going to get enough data in a given keyword to even have anything meaningful. So it has to be based on your budget, your audience, the volume that each keyword can get, the monthly searches that keyword has in a given month. All of those things have to be considered when you're building out an initial keyword structure for an account.
Yeah, understandable. I was really curious. What's the largest number of keywords you've ever managed in an account or you've seen?
Let's see, I managed ads for a Fortune 500 company, and they had, I think, in just their account targeting North America, I think they had 8,000 keywords.
8,000. Wow.
And they had an account for each continent or like each market, but that was just
Like a different
North
account per
America.
market.
Yeah, because of different currencies. But, yeah.
Oh, understandable. Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. Yeah. The reason I asked is because I have a completely ridiculous story. I had one client I had that had 6 million keywords.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
How many of those had any clicks or
A
impressions?
smaller number, but and to be fair, they had like the biggest search term universe of any company I'd ever worked with in my life. It was 6 million
6
keywords.
million.
Yeah. They spend about 5 million a month, but still, that's like a
It's
dollar a
like
keyword.
$1 a keyword.
Yeah, it's insane. So anyways, that was tangential, but
Cut those
but-
down, team.
But I think there's definitely been a shift, like if we're talking about PPC strategy and in terms of the number of keywords, because if you're looking, this is like 2017 PPC, like this account that I was talking about, they've been going since 2008 or something. So they got a lot of history there, and the world of PPC has changed quite a bit. And it seems like most PPC marketers are on the side that like things have changed really significantly in the past decade with
Especially
PPC.
with keywords.
Yeah. And even in the past 3 or 4 years, what are some of those big changes?
Yeah, there's been a big change in, first of all, from the point of view of the platform, the big change has been match types. Google has become a lot more loose and liberal with how it matches your keyword with search terms. They say it's to give the algorithm a bit more freedom and to match intent, not just the actual keyword. But really what I think it is, they want to sell inventory on searches that in general aren't being bid on by advertisers. That's a big change, is like what was an exact match keyword is now much looser than what it was a couple years ago.
Yeah, just to clarify for everybody listening, if you're not familiar with match types, basically when you give Google your keyword, you say we buy houses, for example. There's different match types. You could say exact match. Let's talk historically how it was before we talk about how it is now, because it's a mess. But historically, that meant like someone had to type in we buy houses exactly. And if they typed in we buy house, then it wouldn't have showed up, right? Exact. Then there's phrase match, which would be like we buy houses has to be in there somewhere. So they could type in we buy houses California and you would still show up. And then there's a more broad match, which was like you type in we buy houses, but then someone says we buy ugly houses and you still show up. And if you ever want to learn how to completely evade an issue and give yourself full leash to do anything you want to, then go read Google's help articles about what match types mean these days. It's hilarious. They basically say, if you do this match type, it means all of these things and also whatever we want. Like pretty much every article from Google now just says at the bottom, also whatever we want in their own words.
Based on the algorithm's learnings.
Yes, exactly.
Just go
So,
wild.
so the way it used to work is you could have your keyword Apple and maybe you get like Apple, but you wouldn't get apples. And then they changed these close variants. So now you could say, okay, maybe for Apple, I get apples. Now it's you put in apple and you get orange. And Google says they're both fruit. So close enough. And it's different, especially when you get some of these nuances like we buy houses versus buy houses, which mean really different things. How do you think the way to deal with keywords has adapted because of that?
So there was a very popular keyword structure that was used in the past called SCAG, which was single keyword ad group. And basically what people would do is they would build out one ad group with an exact match type of their keywords. And the theory and what worked historically was they would force each search term into one ad group, and then it would match the search with the keyword, with the ad, with the landing page, and have really good matching across the board. But since things have changed and those match types have changed quite a bit, that old way of doing things is pretty obsolete now because it's much harder to match one search with one keyword because they're so loose. And so it's become increasingly important as Google gives more leash to the algorithm to have a really fine-tuned negative keyword list. So it probably is helpful to go into that a bit deeper because they function differently than keywords do.
Yeah. So I guess you could say two types of keywords. There's positive and there's negative. Positive is telling Google what you want. Negative is telling them what you don't want. Negative trumps positive. So I could have a keyword of we buy houses phrase match. I want that to be included. And maybe if someone searches we buy houses, I'll show up. They could search we buy houses California, I show up. But let's just say I have a negative keyword for the word scam and someone searches we buy houses companies that are scams, then I theoretically wouldn't show up.
Right.
Need the plural version, but yeah.
And if we didn't have that negative keyword, we would show up. That would be obviously a poor click. So that highlights the importance of having that negative keyword in there because Google doesn't know the difference in those searches, but we do.
Yeah. You ever played whack-a-mole?
Actually, I don't think I have, but I know the game.
Okay. Yeah. So this is if you want like a visual representation of adding negative keywords, I feel like whack-a-mole is like the most appropriate thing.
They're always popping up.
Yes.
There's always new bad search terms that Google's making you pay for.
Just because in the same way that there's those 15% of Google searches every day that are people searching things in new ways, and that could be beneficial for you, it's also could be negative for you if those are things that aren't quality. And I've seen so many people play this game for years, literally years, and never really get anywhere because there's negative keywords that they theoretically need. How would you protect against that? I'm auditing a lot of these accounts and they're literally years into this and still half their search terms are junk and they're whacking those moles, but they're popping up as fast as they can whack them.
Yeah, there's a couple things that you can do. The first is going through those search terms frequently and just being consistent with that process of search term mining, it's called.
And when we say frequently, in the beginning, we mean like daily.
Daily.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you have like great search term quality and you've been doing it for a while, like you can relax
it
a
gets
bit.
less necessary.
Yeah.
The other thing is going to be the match type that you're adding those negative keywords to. So like Google is very liberal with its positive keyword match types, it's very restrictive in its negative keyword match types. So it requires a very specific kind of negative keyword content for it to actually exclude it. So a very common reason for that game of whack-a-mole is you aren't giving a wide enough range of negative keywords. And so Google is finding just like loopholes around what you told it was a negative keyword.
I saw an example of this the other day in an account. I looked and there were hundreds of search terms related to home buying grants. And they were adding, each time it popped up, they'd add one as an exact match negative keyword.
The whole search term, right?
Yeah, the whole search term, right? Like first time home buyer grants, whole search term is negative. And then something else pops up, like a slight misspelling the next day. And then the next day it's something that doesn't include one of those words. And it's just a constant game. And you just got to add grant as a negative keyword. And then anything that includes the word grant is not going to be there. It's simple. Although I can tell you, I've seen accounts get destroyed by negative keywords before.
You have to be careful that it doesn't exclude a good search term.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's some things that are just hard. Like, for example, buy houses, right? You could see, like, if you're using this theory, you could see someone in there searching buy houses or buy houses in Orlando or buy houses in Cincinnati and all these things. And you're like, okay, I'll just exclude buy houses. But then you exclude we buy houses. And the problem is Google never tells you what you accidentally excluded.
Yep.
So it's just like you restrict your volume forever without knowing it.
Yep.
And it can destroy an account.
And one way to kind of navigate those search terms is that we are able to leverage is we use a shared list of negative keywords across all of our clients. Each time one of our clients reaches a unique negative keyword, all of our clients benefit from that being added in as a negative keyword. And so there's this shared learning that we've built out over years of having accounts where we already know what those bad search terms are. And we give all of our clients the combined learnings of that shared list of negative keywords. So we've already done the whack-a-mole for you, essentially. So just a little plug.
You mean to tell me that if a bad search term has shown up in any account over millions of dollars of spend and hundreds of accounts over 5 years, it would be excluded?
I do mean that, yes.
Wow. What a brilliant strategy. Yeah, it obviously can make a huge difference to have a really extensive negative keyword list. And there's really tangible value there because every single click you get from a keyword or from a search term that's not good, you paid a certain amount of money for that click.
And
it's a big expense.
And if that click becomes a lead, that gives Google that positive feedback that, oh, that's a good one. Let's find more of that. But if it's a bad search term, it's probably a bad lead. And now we've taught Google that bad search term is good and get more of it. So that just gets worse and worse the more bad feedback we give Google. So that's why it's so important to nip those in the bud quickly.
Yeah, understood. So let's break this down to a structure when it comes to keywords, negative keywords. You jumped a little bit in one of the categories here, but let's talk about, I guess I want to summarize, like, how do you do this wrong? How do you do it good enough? And how do you do it just so insanely well that everything's great? And I think it's good to understand because so many people will just generalize and just say, this is the one thing that matters in PPC or something like, because really it's all 8 of these things that we're talking about really matter and arguably more things beyond those, but we don't have forever to talk about all these topics. But how you do it wrong, basically the point is your end result with your search terms is going to be that they're not good. Like you have things in there where the people searching those things aren't looking for you. They're looking to buy a house. They're looking for a home grant. They're looking for anything, a realtor maybe. And then if you're doing it right, you at least have seller intent. You have the right kind of people coming. And that happens through good keywords, good negative keywords. I want to jump in before we go to the absolute best case scenario. We'll explain like exactly how we do this. We don't hold anything back here. But before we get there, let's talk about just like one other thing that some people do wrong that are still like in that good category. I see a lot of people that are way too restrictive with their keywords. They do things like they see they got one deal from a certain keyword one day. So they like try to put all their spend on that keyword, or they have these like judgments about keywords before they have data. That's a good keyword. That's a bad keyword. What would you say about like, where do you draw the line on keyword quality? Because a lot of people think the name of the game is just finding all the best keywords. It's one of the biggest questions we get as part of our sales process is you guys know like the right keywords, right? Mm-hmm. Which I'd say like the answer to that question is yes, but it's 5% of why we have good results for our clients. Mm-hmm. What would you say about that?
We had this discussion in a different episode actually. And I think it's almost every answer in PPC, it depends. It's gray. You have to have data. But what I would say is it's less about finding the absolute best keyword and just putting all of your budget there. And it's more about maximizing the like optimum like peak of that curve between and volume. And so the key is to find the balance between volume and efficiency. And so there are different keywords that bring a different point on that curve. And what the best accounts do is they balance where that budget and where that volume is allocated.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And to put this maybe a little bit more tangible, jumping away from theory a little bit, the way I think about it is there's that whole spectrum of search terms. On the, you have some that are just extremely high quality. The leads you get are awesome. You have some that are people who don't even have a house to sell, right? So the way we generally think about it is get rid of everything. You want to exclude anybody that isn't selling their house, right? I would say if the keyword means that someone wants to sell their house, you should probably have it in your campaign. If you're thinking like, oh, those leads are going to be retail or whatever the case is, there's ways to adjust for that bidding and everything and make it not just a coincidence if you get results, but do it in a data-driven way. And we'll talk about bidding in another episode in the future. It's one of those things. But I guess I think way too much emphasis is put on keywords and not enough emphasis is put on bidding, because you could have every keyword in the world, and if you bid right, you'd be fine. All right, so let's talk about doing this on the absolute best level. What are some things that we do with keywords that kind of take it from a B plus to an A plus, so to speak?
Yeah, it comes down to not just the keywords, but how they're organized and how they're tiered. So the way we build our campaigns is we have identified keywords that meet that floor of being identified as having the intent of a seller, right? That's our first criteria of a keyword. And then we have them organized into themes or categories. So we organize things into different traits that those keywords have in common. So fast, cash, sellers, companies, different things like that. And then we next organize them by intent and by quality. So we are ensuring that we are not only finding the right audience, but we're speaking to the needs of those different search terms and then having them organized by the profitability that those searches are going to give us.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're touching on, like, we talk at some points about this concept of DMA, a dynamic motivation algorithm, and what we've named a lot of the technology behind our strategies, so to speak.
Under the hood type
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. And it's an oversimplification. There's like a ton of different algorithms and stuff like that. But one of them is a keyword structuring algorithm. And the way that it works is, how familiar are you with machine learning cluster analysis?
I have some knowledge of it, but I imagine our audience would like to have some deep
Yeah,
dive
fair.
into it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Let's just say you look at a graph and it's got like 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner and 3 dots in the bottom left-hand corner. You can create clusters from that. You can say these 3 dots belong together, those 3 dots belong together. If we take this to more of the machine learning spectrum, that plot could have an infinite number of dimensions, and there could be an infinite number of values. And machine learning algorithms can, just like our eyes can group things together in thousands of variables, they can group things together into the things that are most similar to each other. And I know that's confusing, but it's just way more powerful than what we can do ourselves. And we use a form of cluster analysis to build our keywords. The way that it works is we start with search terms, because keywords are just a means to an end. We don't even care about keywords. All we care about is search terms. But different search terms, you could have thousands of keywords that could trigger a single search term because they all match to it in some type of different way. So why do you choose to do one keyword versus another? The way that we analyze is on 2 separate levels. The first one, and this is extremely hard to build an algorithm around because it's not something that's really easy to quantify. It's intent. It's the first thing that you mentioned. What does the person want? And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but as you can imagine, you can build like a scale of intent, and you can find things that are closer in terms of their intent. We Buy Houses and We Buy Houses Florida, those 2 things are closer in intent than Sell My House in Any Condition and Sell My House Fast. Those have different actual intent, different motivation points. So that's one thing that it groups it based on. And then the other thing is the expected conversion rate. Like you mentioned, like the expected profitability or something like that, because bids are often going to happen on a keyword level. And if we have some things in that keyword that are really high value and we have other things that are really low value, what happens is we underbid on some, we overbid on the others. So we want to have everything appropriate to value within the thing. So we analyze like the best combination between those things, and we build it into a tiered structure, which it's hard to explain exactly how that works and everything. But that's, in my opinion, the gold standard of keyword. I don't even know what you call it, like structuring or
Keyword theory, yeah.
yeah.
So with all that said, I would love to bring it back to, in practice, how can the average investor take these learnings and apply it into their own marketing? What do you think the average investor that like currently owns their own account and runs their own PPC, like what could they do right now to go from poor to average or from average to good?
Yeah, I really think it's about your search term quality. If you want to look at a metric that helps us, you can look through each of your keywords or each of your search terms and say, does this person want to sell their house or do they not want to sell their house? And find a percentage of them that are. I think shooting for above 95%. The thing is, yes, you could make that 100%, but you'll restrict yourself too much getting there, because then you're not exploring enough. You're not getting enough of those long tail unique
Yep.
searches and everything like that. You're constricting Google a lot. You should always have bad search terms, but you should have less of them. So in my opinion, that's number one, is getting that within check. Number two is getting your keyword structure right, putting keywords in ad groups organized by topic, and not having like way too many ad groups nor too little. It's hard to say what is the right number of ad groups. I could tell you we usually do 13. I wouldn't have a problem with 20 or 7. Probably have a problem with 2 or with
Or
1,000.
100. Yeah.
Yeah, or 100 even. Yeah, that's just too many. There's too many ad groups. So I think organizing those. If you have major issues with your search term quality and you can't seem to solve it with negative keywords, consider going more broad on the negative keywords or going more narrow on the keywords. I think like a good example for this is broad match keywords. We've actually had some good success testing broad match keywords recently, but it's really advanced, not beginner. Google makes it hard though, because when you put a keyword in, you have to try to make it not broad match. The default is broad match. And broad match is the one that will destroy an account. It's like an expert level thing, but Google tries to make it the beginner level thing. So I would say for anybody starting PPC, just avoid broad match until you like are ready for it. You need to be ready for it though. Would you say anything else?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to build an account maintenance schedule. I do these things daily, I do these things weekly, I do these things monthly. And within what we're talking about on this episode, I would probably go into my search terms probably weekly. I think it's probably a safe place given budget and given like number of search terms that your account probably is generating. And then I would just add in the bad search terms as a negative keyword. And then I would review your keywords monthly. Just look and see if there's anything that's doing poorly based on either cost per lead or cost per qualified lead if you have that data. And then consider pausing those poor keywords or even bidding lower on them. But I'd say weekly, look over your search terms, monthly, look over your keywords and see how they're each performing.
Yeah. And if you have anybody else managing your PPC, I think one thing to remember is this is like one piece of PPC that requires a lot of industry knowledge. Like search terms, it's not like that it's really clear which ones are good, which ones aren't. You have to understand the seller psychology and the kind of business that you run into. So this is a situation where if you are working with like an agency that's not real estate specific, ask them to send you reports on search terms and allow you to help them add negative keywords, because you'll probably know better than they do what the stuff that's good is and what the stuff that's bad is. Or if you do work with a niche specific agency that really gets it, which to be honest, there's a lot of our competitors do really good with keywords and negative keywords, a few that do really bad. And I just don't understand how they do bad if they're like, this is all they do. So for the most part, if you work with an industry specific agency, they'll probably be pretty good at this. But if you work with a generic agency, you have to be really careful. And if you do it yourself, you have to be really careful. And there's a few niche agencies that are like, I consistently see some pretty rough stuff there.
Yeah. And what I've noticed in just working at different agencies is a pretty clear sign of whether an agency is doing their job or not is if their search terms are strong. Agencies will often coast on that task of keeping their search terms clean. And so if you're worried about that performance, I would start there and look at your search terms, because if those are poor, then it's likely that the agency isn't doing their job.
How would you look at the search terms?
So what you'll do is go into your Google ad account. You'll go under campaigns, pick a campaign, go under keywords, and then go under search terms under that, and you'll see all of the search terms. You can go in and change the date range to see longer or shorter and see what search terms you've bid on over the last few, over that date range. One thing I would caution is Google has removed a lot of search term visibility as a privacy measure. So you won't always be able to see every click that was brought in and which search term it was, but you'll be able to have an idea of the just raw quality of your search terms.
Yeah, in my experience, it's 2/3-ish of the data, something like that. And you can see in there how much of it is. That's another case where like the shared negative keyword list that we do is so valuable, because there could be so many search terms in one account that you don't see them. But the chances that they could have popped up across one of the other 100 accounts that we manage or something like that is decently high. That's the worst thing about Google, is when you're wasting money in places that you can't even see, which that's the topic for another day, how big of a problem that's becoming. Any closing words for?
No, I think that was a good intro to keyword structures, the benefits of having good search terms. And
Yeah, absolutely. That's it for the podcast today. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next time.